Hello, sixth grade family. I'm getting on to read to you 33 to 35, which is your reading for today, which today for you guys will be Wednesday. And we're going to bounce back and look at some comprehension components. Don't forget to do the check-in forms. It looks like about 25 out of my 43 friends are doing those. Those are part of your grade. So remember, those of you who are asking me how we can bring up our grades for the last 2 weeks of the semester, that's a really good way to do that, okay? So we're starting part 3 of Maniac McGee today. And when we ended yesterday, Grayson had passed away and Maniac started running again. He just couldn't stand the sadness of the lack of the amount of people at Grayson's funeral. It says January of that year was too cold and dry for snow. It was a month of frozen hardness of ice. Maniac drifted from hour to hour, day to day, alone with his memories, a stunned and solitary wanderer. He ate only to keep from starving, warmed his body only enough to keep it from freezing to death, ran only because there was no reason to stop. Even if the superintendent had allowed it, he could not have brought himself to stay at the band shell. He returned only long enough to pick up a few things: a blanket, some non-perishable food, the glove, and as many books as he could squeeze into the old black satchel that had hauled Grayson's belongings around the minor leagues. Before he left for good, he got some paint and angrily brushed over the 101 on the door. During the days he ran, usually a slow jog, but sometimes he would suddenly sprint, furious, 10 or 20-second bursts, as though trying to leave himself behind. Sometimes he walked, he crossed and recrossed the river. He wandered in all directions through all their surrounding communities and townships: Bridgeport, Conshohocken, East Norriton, West Nuneaton, Jeffersonville, Plymouth, and Worcester. Whenever he crossed the bridge over the Schuylkill, he turned his eyes so as not to see the nearby P&W trestle. Even so, in his mind's eye, he saw the red and yellow trolley careening from the high track, plunging to the water, killing his parents over and over. After a while, he stopped crossing the bridge. Other than that, he went wherever there was room to go forward, along roads and alleys, railroad tracks, across fields and cemeteries and golf courses. From high above, a tracing of his routes would have looked as hopelessly tangled as the cobble's knot. By nightfall, he was back in Two Mills. He would retrieve the satchel from wherever he had stashed it and find a place to endure the night. A few times he revisited the buffalo pen, where he covered himself with a second blanket of straw. Other times his overnight quarters might be an abandoned car, an empty garage, a basement stairwell. When his original supply of food ran out, he fed himself at the zoo or at the soup kitchen down at the Salvation Army. He did odd jobs for housewives, ran errands for shopkeepers. He would not beg. One day he found himself among monuments and canyon and rolling hills. He was in Valley Forge. Here the Continental Army had suffered through a winter of their own, and the vast, dark, frozen desolation itself seemed a more proper monument than statues and stones. The only buildings here were tiny log and mortar cabins, replicas of the Army shelters. Maniac could feel the ache swelling outward from his breast and filling the enormous bounding spaces. He returned to town for the satchel and put himself up in one of the cabins. It was scarcely bigger than a large doghouse. The floor was dirt. There was a doorway, but no door. Several saltines fell from the blanket. He threw them outside, let the birds have them. He wrapped himself in a blanket and lay down. He lay there all night and all the next day. Dreams pursued memories, courted and danced, and coupled with them, and they became one. And the gaunt, beseeching phantoms that called to him, and the rag-wrapped feet of Washington's regulars, and the faces of his mother and father and Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, and the Beals and Earl Grayson, in that bedeviled army, there would be no more recruits. No one else would orphan him. The second evening came and went. Maniac never stirred, knowing it would not be fast or easy, and deserving nothing less. Grimly, patiently, he waited for death. So at this point, he has given up. He said no one again will orphan him. So Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan have left him. His parents have left him. The Beals were fed up with him, and then Mr. Grayson passes away. So he's awaiting death. If you look over here, it wants you to write about a time in your life that you have experienced great sadness. Do you think it's possible to heal from such sadness? My goodness. So your sadness may not be the same as someone else's sadness. If you think about it enough, I'm sure you have found like something has happened in your life that is sad. If you are one of those miracle people that your life is always gravy, then congratulations. But I'm sure there's something deep enough in there that you can find. Yesterday, we started our new vocabulary terms. So here are some of them that we will fill in. or actually, I guess today you start them because your test was yesterday. It wants you to put some things in order of events, which we cannot do yet because we do not know. We do know that he is in a cabin. We know that that happens there, but we are not sure what event. Chapter 33, they want to know his mood. Two quotes from the text that could support your answer. His mood here is pretty grim, okay? It said, no one else would orphan him. You could write in here, maniac, right here, he patiently waited for death. Those are two terms right there that could tell you right there the mood of this chapter, how sad he is and how he's not going to be left alone. Now we're going to bounce back. He must make his way back to the McNabb house. So let's take a look. It was during the second night in the cabin that he heard a little voice. They were not soldiers' voices. I'm going in this one. No, that one. That one's bigger. I'm tired. I'm stopping. You stupid meatball, it's right there. Another 2 seconds. I'm staying. Great, you beef jerky. Stay. I'm going to that one. Good night. Silence then. Hold on, I'm coming. That was all. The ghostly soldiers returned, their haunted eyes seeking warmth, food, and life. There was no morning, only daylight in the doorway. He pushed himself up, dragged himself outside into the blinding night. The saltines lay in the brown frozen grass. The next cabin was nearby. January slipped an icy finger under his collar and down his back. He pulled the blanket tighter about himself, but it was too late. The finger had touched the last warm coal in his hearth, and his body, fanning the ember, shook itself violently. He walked to the next cabin, looked inside, and saw a body huddled in the corner. An eye opened, stared at him. Then in succession, 3 more eyes opened. The body divided and became 2 little boys. Get a load of this, Meatball, said the one with the front tooth missing. He walks around with a blanket on. Hey, Meatball, why don't you bring your mattress along, too? And your pillow, too, screeched the other. The missing tooth whipped off his woolen cap and smacked Screecher in the face. Screecher retaliated, and Maniac had to step back while a 2-kid tornado swirled around the cabin. When they finished, they rolled onto their back, shook their legs at the ceiling, and laughed as long as they had fought. The volume coming from Screecher was incredible, as though a microphone were embedded in his throat. Finally, Missing Tooth rediscovered the stranger in the doorway. Hey, Meatball, you running away too? No, not really, Maniac replied. Well, we are, went Screecher. Where are you going, Maniac asked. The answer came from both. Mexico! Maniac bit back a grin. When they stood, he saw they couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall or 8 years old. Well, he said, it's good and warm down there, but it's pretty far, you know. Yeah, we know, growled Missing Tooth. You think we're meatballs like you? He grabbed a supermarket bag in the corner, opened it. Look, it was tilled with candy, cupcakes, pies, even a pack of butterscotch crimpets. Maniac's stomach rasped against itself. He remembered how thirsty he was. Where'd you get all this? We stole it, Screecher blurted. The other smacked him with his cap. Shut up, Piper, you stupid sausage. You don't go telling people you stole stuff. Piper returned the cap slap. You shut up, Russell. I didn't tell him where we stole it. This time, the fight was over in less than a minute, but it started up again. When Maniac asked where they were from, and Piper said 2 mills, and Russell said, shut up, he might be a cop, and bopped him good. When they settled down, they stared at him warily. Piper snickered. He ain't no cop, he's a red. Yeah, sneered Russell. That's how much you know. They got cops that looks like kids. That's how they catch kids. They stared at him some more. They moved in cautiously, one on either side. They opened his blanket. They patted him all over. What are we doing this for? Piper wanted to know. We're feeling for a gun, Miss Russell explained. Oh. After the patting, they backed off. So, said Russell, you ain't a cop? Not me, said Maniac. He moved him from the doorway. And with only a moment's pause, the story came to him. A pizza delivered, boy. We have a contest every week, and you 2 were chosen for a free pizza. The 2 gaped at each other. We were? Yep, a large. Where is it? Demanded Russell, glancing around. At Cobble's Corner. You have 24 hours to claim your prize. He waited while they bickered over what to do. Valley Forge was a good 5 or 6 miles from 2 mills. These kids might not have made it to Mexico, but they had come a long way and stayed out overnight, and someone somewhere must be worried sick about them, and he had a feeling they weren't kidding about stealing the food. He figured he'd better help them make up their minds. You know, he said, you're caking the long way to Mexico. If you come back to 2 mills with me, I'll show you a shortcut. That did it. Soon the 3 of them were trucking past the Washington Memorial Chapel, Russell and Piper with their bag, Maniac with his satchel. It was early afternoon when they walked into Cobble's Corner at Hector and Birch. Maniac produced his certificate for conquering Cobble's Knot, and 20 minutes later, the young runaways were attacking a large pizza with pepperoni. Maniac confined himself with 3 glasses of water and a half a dozen crimpets. The boys agreed with Maniac that they ought to stay the night in their own house before setting out for Mexico in the morning. They were barely a block from Cobble's when Maniac heard a familiar voice. Bellowing and barreling down the street was the fearsome fastballer, king of the Cobras, Big John McNabb himself, and he was roaring mad. Maniac might have taken off, but he found himself clung to and clutched by the two little Urchins. They huddled behind him like babies on a possum's back as Giant John came red-faced and huffing up to them. "Where you been?" he yelled. As Maniac considered what to say, the Urchins peeped from behind him. "We wasn't no place, John. We was right here with this here kid. And he ain't no cop neither. We checked him out." For the first time, Giant John looked straight at Maniac. A smile crossed his face. "Well, well, the frog man." The smile vanished. "So what are you doing with my little brothers?" So the little brothers belong to John McNabb. How funny is that? All right. What is it like living at McNabb House? Well, we don't know that yet. So let's keep looking here. I'm going to bounce back up and we're going to look at these vocab terms real quick. We have desolation. If you've looked this up, desolation is another word for being isolated or alone. Retaliated means that they fought back. Bellowing is usually like a loud noise or like a roaring or shouting. And lambasting would be scolding someone or like putting them down. So if you're complimenting somebody, the opposite, because we're looking for an antonym, would be lambasting. Whispering, the opposite of that would be bellowing. Surrendered, the opposite of that would be desolation. And joyfulness, the opposite of joyfulness, I guess, if we were looking for that, would be, I guess surrendered would be retaliated, and joyfulness would be desolation, because in desolation, you're also sad. So if you're listening to this, then those are your answers there. Let's go ahead and read that last chapter for today. It took a while for everything to get straightened out. First, Giant John had to be convinced that Maniac was not kidnapping his brother. Then the brothers had to do some more trembling and clinging while John finished lambasting them for running away, which apparently they did about every other week. Then when the brothers found out that their pizza person was none other than the famous Maniac McGee, the very same one who had blasted their big brother's fastballs to smithereens and finished him off with a home run frog, well, it took a good 5 minutes of rolling on the sidewalk to get all the laughing out of their systems, which of course got Giant John more than a little steamed. Prompting Maniac, who didn't like seeing John disgraced before his little brothers, to say, "Yeah, but didn't John tell you what happened the next day?" And the brother said, "No, what?" And Giant John said, "Huh?" Maniac winked at John and crossed his fingers. "Sure, John, you remember, wink, wink, at the Little League field the next day you said I was lucky that all you threw me was fastballs because you weren't ready to reveal your secret pitch, the one you'd been working on. Remember?" Wink. McNabb nodded dumbly. "And so I said, well, come on, I can hit anything, pitch it to me. And you pitched it, and I missed it by a mile. And you kept pitching it to me all day long. And I never even hit a foul ball on it. What was the pitch?" "What was the pitch?" chanted the Urchins. "It was," Maniac paused for a dramatic build-up, "the stop ball." "The stop ball?" "Yeah, and you should have seen it. It comes right up to the plate, looking all fat and easy to belt. And then, just when you take your swing, Maniac got into his batter's stance and demonstrated. It sort of stops, and your bat just whiffs the air." He whipped at an imaginary stop ball. "Wow," said the brothers, gazing up at their big brother. And so Maniac was invited to accompany the brothers McNabb to their home. Despite the cold, the front door was wide open, and Maniac could smell the inside before he could see it. The first thing he did see was yellow, short-haired Mongrel looking innocently up at him while taking a leak in the middle of the living room floor. So that's a dog, I bet. "Clean that up," John ordered Russell. "Clean that up," Russell ordered Piper. Piper just walked on by. After closing the front door, which was surprisingly heavy, Maniac found a stack of newspapers in a corner. He laid some over the puddle to soak in, then gave himself a tour of the downstairs. Maniac had seen amazing things in his lifetime, but nothing as amazing as that house. From the smell of it, he knew this wasn't the first time an animal had relieved itself on the rugless floor. In fact, in another comer, he spotted a form of relief that could not be soaked up by newspapers. So that would be poop. Cans and bottles lay all over, along with crusts, peelings, cores, scraps, rinds, wrappers, everything you could normally find in a garbage can, and everywhere there were raisins. As he walked through the dining room, something, an old tennis ball, hit him on top of the head and bounced away. He looked up into the laughing faces of Russell and Piper. The hole in the ceiling was so big they both could have jumped through it at once. He ran a hand along one wall. The peeling paint came off like cornflakes. Nothing could be worse than the living and dining rooms, yet the kitchen was. A jar of peanut butter had crashed to the floor. Something had gotten a running start, jumped onto it, and skied a brown, one-footed track to the stove. On the table where there appeared to be remains of autopsy performed upon a large bird, possibly a crow. The refrigerator contained 2 food groups, mustard and beer. The raisins here were even more abundant. He spotted several of them moving. They weren't raisins, they were roaches. The front door opened, and seconds later, a man climbed into the kitchen. He wore no winter coat, jacket, only a sleeveless green sweatshirt which ballooned over his enormous stomach. Tattoos blued his upper arms. His hands were nearly pure black. Stale body odor mingled with that of fries and burgers coming from the Burger King bag he held. Dropping the bag next to the bird remains, he bellowed, "Chow!" and took a beer from the fridge. He downed a good half of it in one swig, belched, double-clutched, and belched again. He had to know someone besides himself was standing in the kitchen, and just as obviously, he didn't care. 2 floor-quaking crashes from the dining room. "Geronimo! Geronimo!" Russell and Piper had taken the direct route via the hole. "What'd you bring, Dad? Whoppers? Yay, Whoppers!" They tore into the bag like jackals into a carrion. Plastic flew. Fries flew. They both wanted the same Whopper. Mashed their tugging fists. The Whopper splurted sauce and cheese and pickle chips. Then it split. Russell lurched backward into the kitchen table with his half. Piper lurched backward into the opposite direction, and with nothing to stop him, sailed right through the cellar doorway and down the cellar steps. The final thud was followed by the truck, a horn blast of Piper's laughter. When Giant John ambled in, the father said, "Get the blocks." "No," grunted John, pulling out a pair of Whoppers. He tossed one to Maniac. "We need more," growled the father. "We need more." "I heard." McNabb smashed the tabletop. 3 fries and a bird wing flew to the floor. "Now." John walked out, nonchalantly munching. "I was busy." The rest of the night was scenes from a loony movie. Scene: McNabb the father swaggers bare-armed out the front door, bellowing back, "Do your homework." Scene: Maniac retrieves the wet newspaper from the living room. There are no wastebaskets in the house. He finds a trash can in the backyard next to a pile of cinder blocks. He dumps the soggy papers in the can, which is empty. Scene: small turds of an unfamiliar shape appear here and there along the baseboards of the first floor. "Please don't be rats," Maniac prays. Scene: the Cobras come in. They glare at Maniac, but Giant John tells them to lay off. They raid the fridge for beer. They smoke cigarettes. They belch and fart. They curse. Russell and Piper, kitty cobras, pop their own beer cans. Guzzle, swagger, belch, smoke, curse. Scene: football game. From the front of the living room to the back of the dining room, except for space, it has everything a regular game has: running, passing, blocking, tackling, kicking. There's little furniture to get in the way. Ordinarily, the windows wouldn't last 5 minutes, but the windows of this house are beaded up with plywood. Body-blocked cobras fly into the walls. The house flinches. Scene: a faint rustling noise behind the stove. "Oh no, rats." Maniac dares to look. It's a turtle, box turtle, munching an old Whopper lettuce. Phew. Scene: the boys' bedroom. Russell and Piper lie prone at the hole. They fire toy submachine guns, ta 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 ta, at the cobras heading out the front door. Piper jumps up and blows Maniac away, killing him at least 15 times. "This is how we're going to do it. Bam, bam, bam." "The guns will be real," says Russell, still prone and firing, the stock of the toy gun tied against his cheek. "Yeah," squawks Piper. "Real." He plops back to the floor, sprays the whole downstairs. "Soon's they start corning in. Bam, bam, bam." "Who?" says Maniac. "The enemy," says Russell. "Who's that?" said Maniac. Russell stops firing long enough to send Maniac a "Where have you been?" look. "Who do you think?" he sneers. He points the red barrel of the submachine gun toward the bedroom door, toward the east end, the heavy front door. Scene: darkness, silence, sometimes early morning. Maniac lies between the 2 brothers on the bed. Do cockroaches climb bedposts? Unable to sleep, asking himself, "What am I doing here?" Remembering Hester and Lester on his lap, Grayson's hug, corn muffin in the toaster oven, thinking, "Who's the orphan here anyway?" Hearing, as he at last lowers himself into sleep's deep waters, a door slam, a slurred voice, "Do your homework." Fearing, will I float? So a lot of things happen in this chapter. Why do you think that he says, "Who is the orphan here?" We still can't quite finish this up because we haven't read the last chapter in here. What is it like living at the McNabb house? Holy cow. I mean, we could answer in so many things of what's going on and the difference from the Beale house. You should be able to take that away. We don't know the weekly deals here. And then it says, imagine that Maniac gives a eulogy at Grayson's funeral. So a eulogy is like what you say about the person who passed away, like that is important. So I want you to jot some things down there. So you have not read chapter 36 yet, so we will attack that one tomorrow. With that being said, I will see you today, hopefully at 1 o'clock at our meet, and see you soon.